I still remember the day I moved back to Ravenswood, the small town where I grew up. The smell of freshly cut grass and the sound of children's laughter filled the air as I stepped out of my car and onto the familiar asphalt. It had been 10 years since I left, chasing dreams and opportunities beyond these quiet streets. But life had a way of bringing you full circle, and now I was back, determined to rebuild my life and reconnect with the past. As I settled into my old routine, working at the local library and helping out around town, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. The town seemed different. People were quieter, more reserved than before. The once thriving Main Street now looked worn and tired, as if the very life had been drained from it. I tried to brush it off as small-town ennui, but the unease lingered. It was a nagging sense of discontent that refused to be silenced. I found myself lost in thought, wandering the aisles of the library, searching for answers that never seemed to come. The books, once my sanctuary, now felt like a burden, their words whispering secrets I couldn't quite decipher. As the days turned into weeks, the feeling only intensified. It was as if an invisible presence was watching me, waiting for something to happen. I began to wonder if I was losing my mind, if the isolation and solitude of this small town were finally taking their toll on my sanity. I was walking home from the library, lost in my thoughts as I always seemed to be, when I stumbled upon something that made my blood run cold. It was an ancient tree, its bark twisted and gnarled with age, standing sentinel near my house. As I approached, I noticed a symbol etched into the trunk, seemingly carved by human hands but radiating an otherworldly energy. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I reached out to touch it, feeling an inexplicable connection to the mark. It was as if I had seen it before, even though I knew I hadn't. The symbol pulsed with a faint, blue light that seemed to seep into my very pores, making my skin prickle with unease. I felt like I was being pulled into something that didn't want me to look away. The tree seemed to loom over me, its branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, as if warning me to stay away. But I couldn't tear myself away from the symbol. It was as if it held a secret, one that only I could unlock. As I stood there, transfixed by the mark, I felt my mind begin to spin with possibilities. What did this symbol mean? Was it some sort of message from an unknown sender? Or was it something more sinister, a harbinger of something terrible to come? The questions swirled in my head like a maelstrom, leaving me breathless and shaken. I knew then that I had stumbled upon something big, something that would change the course of my life forever. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that lingered from my encounter with the symbol, but as night began to fall, I was confronted with a new kind of fear. At first, it was just a faint scratching sound, like fingernails on wood, coming from within the walls of my house. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as I wondered if someone was trying to get my attention. But there was no one there. The sound seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing off the drywall and plaster, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. As I listened intently, the scratching grew louder, more insistent, like a person trying to claw their way out of the wall. My skin crawled with goosebumps as I realized that this was no ordinary noise. It was as if something was trying to get my attention, to make me listen. The sounds were joined by whispers, soft and raspy, like the voice of someone who had been dead for years. They seemed to be coming from all directions, swirling around me in a maddening dance. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality as the cacophony grew louder, more intense. It was then that I heard the crackles, faint at first, but growing louder and more frequent. They sounded like sparks, igniting and dying out in rapid succession, leaving an eerie silence between each burst. The sounds were like nothing I had ever experienced before, a symphony of terror that seemed to be closing in on me from all sides. I was trapped, unable to escape the horror that was unfolding around me. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease that lingered from my encounter with the symbol, but as night began to fall, I was confronted with a new kind of fear. At first, it was just a faint scratching sound, like fingernails on wood, coming from within the walls of my house. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest, as I wondered if someone was trying to get my attention. But there was no one there. The sound seemed to be coming from all around me, echoing off the drywall and plaster, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. As I listened intently, the scratching grew louder, more insistent, like a person trying to claw their way out of the wall. My skin crawled with goosebumps as I realized that this was no ordinary noise. It was as if something was trying to get my attention, to make me listen. The sounds were joined by whispers, soft and raspy, like the voice of someone who had been dead for years. They seemed to be coming from all directions, swirling around me in a maddening dance. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality as the cacophony grew louder, more intense. It was then that I heard the crackles, faint at first, but growing louder and more frequent. They sounded like sparks, igniting and dying out in rapid succession, leaving an eerie silence between each burst. The sounds were like nothing I had ever experienced before, a symphony of terror that seemed to be closing in on me from all sides. I was trapped, unable to escape the horror that was unfolding around me. At first, it was just small things. A misplaced item here, a forgotten appointment there. It was as if the very fabric of reality was beginning to unravel. People around me started to experience these minor, inexplicable events. Sarah's favorite coffee mug turned up in the most unlikely places, only to disappear again without explanation. Tom's phone would ring with no one on the other end, and when he tried to call back, there would be no signal. Even I wasn't immune to the strange occurrences. I would find myself walking down a familiar street, only to realize that I had taken a wrong turn somewhere. The sense of unease was palpable, like a creeping fog that seeped into every pore. It was as if the world was slowly losing its grip on sanity. People started to whisper about an ancient cult that had once operated in these parts, one that had been said to summon and control malevolent forces. Some believed it was just a myth, a legend meant to scare children into behaving. But I knew better. I had seen things, heard whispers in the night, felt the weight of something ancient and malevolent lurking just beyond the edge of perception. The slipping away began, bit by bit, as if the very threads that held reality together were fraying. It was a slow-motion collapse, a gradual unraveling of the fabric of our world, and I knew that I was not alone in feeling it. Sarah noticed that the town's weather was becoming increasingly unpredictable. Storms would roll in with no warning, bringing heavy rain and powerful winds. The temperature would fluctuate wildly, as if the very fabric of reality was being manipulated. And then there were the strange cosmic radiation readings. Equipment would malfunction, and people would report seeing strange lights in the sky. It was as if the town had become a hub for some kind of interdimensional activity. The skis themselves seemed to be shifting and flowing like a living thing. Dark clouds would gather on the horizon, only to dissipate into nothingness before they could reach land. It was as if the weather was being controlled by some unseen force, one that was beyond human comprehension. And then there were the dreams. Sarah had always been prone to vivid dreams, but since the strange occurrences began, her dreams had become even more intense and disturbing. She would dream of dark forests and twisted creatures, of cities burning and oceans boiling. It was as if her subconscious was trying to tell her something, but she couldn't quite decipher the message. As the days passed, Sarah felt herself becoming increasingly disconnected from reality. The world around her seemed to be spinning out of control, and she wasn't sure what was real and what was just a product of her own fevered imagination. But one thing was certain: something was very wrong in this town, and Sarah was determined to find out what. As Sarah delved deeper into research, she began to question her own sanity. Vivid dreams haunted her every waking moment, filled with twisted visions of the town's dark past. Disorienting visions of impossible landscapes and eerie atmospheres threatened to consume her, and an overwhelming sense of dread clung to her like a shroud, making it hard for her to distinguish reality from fantasy. She became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the strange occurrences, poring over ancient texts and scouring the town's history for clues. But the more she learned, the more her grip on sanity began to slip. She started to see things that weren't there: shadowy figures lurking in the corners of her vision, whispers in the wind that only she could hear. Her friends and family grew concerned, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was on the cusp of a breakthrough. The more she pushed herself to uncover the truth, the more she felt like she was being pulled down into the depths of madness. And yet, she couldn't stop. She was driven by a morbid curiosity, a need to know what lay at the heart of the town's darkness. As the days passed, Sarah's behavior became increasingly erratic. She would pace back and forth in her room, muttering to herself about ancient rituals and forbidden knowledge. Her eyes took on a wild, far-off look, as if she was staring into the very abyss of insanity. And still, she pressed on, driven by a maddening compulsion to uncover the truth. Little did she know, the truth was waiting for her at the edge of madness itself. The disappearances started happening. One by one, people vanished without explanation, leaving behind only cryptic messages and eerie symbols. At first, it was just small things: a coworker who never showed up for work, a neighbor who suddenly moved away without warning. But as the days passed, more and more people began to vanish, until it seemed like the entire town was being consumed by some kind of dark force. Sarah's research had uncovered a pattern, however. All of those who had disappeared had been involved in the strange occurrences, or had stumbled upon something they shouldn't have. It was as if the town itself was hungry for something, and it would stop at nothing to get it. The messages left behind by the disappearances were always the same: simple, cryptic phrases scrawled on walls, hidden in trash cans, or etched into the bark of trees. They seemed to be a warning or a prophecy, but Sarah couldn't decipher their meaning. The symbols that accompanied the messages were even more disturbing: twisted, arcane shapes that seemed to shift and writhe like living things. As the disappearances continued, Sarah felt herself becoming increasingly isolated. Her friends and family were all either gone or hiding from her, fearful of what she had uncovered. And yet, she couldn't help but feel drawn to the darkness, like a moth to a flame. She knew that she was playing with forces beyond her control, but she couldn't resist the urge to keep exploring, to see where the mystery would lead her. Little did she know, the disappearances were only just beginning, and she was about to become the next target. Sarah became obsessed with uncovering the truth behind the disappearances. She spent every waking moment researching, interviewing witnesses, and scouring the town for clues. Her investigation took her to every corner of the town, from the old abandoned factories on the outskirts to the quaint shops in the downtown area. She talked to people who had been affected by the disappearances, trying to piece together a timeline of events. She also started to investigate strange occurrences that had been happening around the town unexplained noises, movements out of the corner of her eye, and other bizarre phenomena. Sarah was determined to find out what was happening to the people in this town, and she was willing to do whatever it took to get to the bottom of it. As she delved deeper into her investigation, Sarah started to notice a pattern. The disappearances seemed to be linked to an old, abandoned church on the outskirts of town. She had never seen anyone go inside, but some people claimed to have heard strange noises coming from within its walls at night. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached the church, sensing that she was getting close to something important. She pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside, her heart pounding in her chest. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Sarah fumbled for her flashlight and turned it on, casting flickering shadows around the room. As she looked around, she saw that the church was empty, but there were symbols etched into the walls, the same twisted shapes she had seen in the messages left behind by the disappearances. Suddenly, Sarah heard a faint noise coming from the back of the church. It sounded like footsteps, light and cautious, as if someone was trying not to be seen. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she turned towards the sound, her eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. Through her research, Sarah discovered a connection between the symbol on the tree and an ancient alien artifact. She spent hours poring over dusty tomes in the town's library, searching for any mention of the symbol or similar markings. Finally, after weeks of searching, she found a passage from an ancient text that described a mysterious symbol etched into the bark of a sacred tree. The tree was said to have been planted by an advanced civilization, one that had visited Earth thousands of years ago and left behind a legacy of strange artifacts and symbols. Sarah's heart raced as she realized that the symbol on the tree might be more than just a random marking. It could be a key to understanding the disappearances. She spent the next few days studying the ancient text, trying to decipher the meaning behind the symbol. As she delved deeper into her research, Sarah began to notice strange similarities between the symbol and other markings found on the town's buildings and monuments. It was as if the symbol was a message, left behind by an unknown force that wanted to convey a specific idea or warning. And then, one night, Sarah had a breakthrough. She was studying an ancient map of the town, looking for any connection between the symbol and other landmarks. As she traced her finger over the map, she noticed something strange, a small inscription etched into the edge of the map, almost invisible to the naked eye. The inscription read, "The tree holds the key." Suddenly, everything fell into place. The symbol on the tree was not just a random marking. It was a key to unlocking an ancient secret. And Sarah had finally found the clue she needed to understand what was happening in the town. As Sarah delved deeper into the truth, she started experiencing terrifying, hallucinatory episodes, hearing disembodied voices, seeing ghostly apparitions, and feeling an existential dread. She would be walking down a street and suddenly hear a voice whispering her name, or see a figure out of the corner of her eye that would vanish when she turned to look. The symbols on the trees seemed to be pulsing with a malevolent energy, as if they were alive and watching her every move. Sarah's research had led her to believe that the disappearances were connected to an ancient cult that had worshipped an otherworldly entity. But now, she was beginning to wonder if she had stumbled into something far more sinister. She started to feel like she was losing her grip on reality, as if the forces of darkness were closing in around her. One night, Sarah received a mysterious package at her doorstep, a small, ornate box with no return address. Inside, she found a single symbol etched into the lid, identical to the one she had seen on the trees. Suddenly, the air around her seemed to thicken and distort, as if reality itself was bending to accommodate some unseen presence. Sarah knew that she had to get out of there, but her legs felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. And then the voices started, a cacophony of whispers and screams that seemed to come from all directions at once. "You should not have looked," they whispered. "Now you will never be seen." Sarah's heart was racing, her mind reeling with fear. She knew that she had to find a way out, but the darkness seemed to be closing in around her, suffocating her. And then everything went black. The town descended into chaos as more people disappeared, and Sarah realized that she was running out of time to uncover the truth before it's too late. She knew that she had to act fast, but her mind was racing with doubts and fears. As she frantically searched for answers, she stumbled upon an ancient ritual site deep in the woods, hidden away from prying eyes. The air was thick with the scent of incense and something else, something sinister. Sarah's heart pounded as she approached the altar, where a group of robed figures were gathered, chanting and swaying to an otherworldly rhythm. At the center of the circle stood an ancient artifact, pulsing with an eerie energy. Suddenly, it all clicked into place: the symbols on the trees, the disappearances, the ritual site. Sarah knew that she had stumbled upon something massive, something that threatened the very fabric of reality. With a surge of determination, she charged forward, determined to stop whatever was happening. But as she reached out to grab the artifact, she felt a strange sensation, as if time itself was bending around her. The world slowed down, and Sarah saw visions of the past and future, all converging into a single moment. She realized that she had been running out of time not just for herself, but for humanity itself. The ritual was not just about summoning an entity. It was about unleashing a catastrophic event that would reset the timeline, erasing entire civilizations from existence. Sarah knew that she had to stop the ritual, no matter what it took. With a deep breath, she reached out and shattered the artifact, shattering the ritual's hold on reality. The world snapped back into focus, and the chanting ceased. As the robed figures stumbled backwards in confusion, Sarah stood tall, victorious, but scarred. She knew that she had saved humanity from an unspeakable fate, but at what cost? The memories of what she had seen would haunt her forever, a reminder of the horrors that lurked just beyond the veil of reality. And as she walked away from the ritual site, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time, not for herself, but for the world.